all of a sudden mayhem, people yelling. Felt like somebody was taking black curtains and just drawing them up until that light went out. I was pretty sure I was dying. I was going to die. I thought that was it.
Every year, the lives of thousands of Canadians are saved or improved because of organ and tissue transplants. Some individuals live in hope that a donor will one day be found. Others die, simply waiting for a match.
In 2019, more than 3,000 organ transplants were performed in Canada. Approximately 60% came from deceased donors.
Each organ transplant story has two starkly different faces. One miraculous, the other tragic. A story of joy and new hope against one of grieving and loss. Behind these are stories of real people with real families. John Dickhout and Rick Prashoff are among them. The Gifts of Life series peers into both sides of the organ donation story.
Hi, I'm John Dickhout. I am, this past January, celebrated my 4th anniversary as a organ recipient. My wife and I were living in the Philippines at the time. This is in 2013. I've been there for a couple of years, and we had a standing date of golf with a group of expats called the Manila Dogs, who lived in Manila. One of the things we did regularly was every Sunday we played golf. Then a few of the people just made comments that I didn't look well, but being stubborn and determined, we decided to finish the round.
No, you decide.
Okay, I decided to finish the round. But after the round, I showered up and changed, and I still wasn't feeling right. So I said, okay, let's go to the hospital. And as soon as I told them what was going on, they said, okay, let's get you in here right now, and hooked me up to an ECG. And it's just, they kind of set it beside the bed, and the thing is feeding off, the paper's feeding off, and I saw a little tear in Lynn's eye. Because she'd seen an ECG like that before. Apparently, I'd have a pretty massive heart attack, and it was so surreal. I was still running on the treadmill every couple of days, or at least a few times a week, and ate well, did all the right things I was supposed to do. Never ever had done any drugs, and we had a few drinks one now and again, but nothing serious. I never smoked. There was no family history. Just didn't make any sense. So it was a pretty surreal experience. And I think it was the second day I was in ICU. Lynn was obviously in the room with me, and I sat up on the edge of the bed to urinate. They wouldn't let me, they didn't trust me to go walk to the bathroom for fear I'd fall over or something, I guess. So I did my business, and then it's like, oh man, I'm feeling really lightheaded. So Lynn said, well, just lay back. She put the head of the bed back and lift up your knees. And I'm looking over at the monitor, and I was around the 80s, something like that at that time, 80 beats a minute. And I just saw it starting to slowly drop. And it was in the 70s, and then it's the 60s. And now I'm feeling really weird, and the 50s and the 40s. And then everything's kind of like hazy now. The last number I remember seeing was in the low 30s, I think, around 30. And a couple of things happened. First, I remember hearing more than seeing, just all of a sudden mayhem, people yelling. There was the room that had been just Lynn and I was suddenly full of people. And I remember in the hospital room I was in, it was typical, 2x4 ceiling tiles, those press tiles or whatever. But right above my bed was one of light fixtures. So like the same kind of ceiling tile, but it was with the fluorescent lights above. And I remember looking up at that light, and it felt like somebody was taking black curtains and just drawing them up until that light went out. I remember looking up at Lynn and just saying, just tell me what to do. I'll do anything. And to me, I thought I was yelling at her. And she told me much later that it was barely a whisper. I was pretty sure I was dying. I was going to die. I thought that was it. And I had been predeceased. I am predeceased by my mom and my brother by a few years before that. And I remember specifically one thought in my head saying, and I'm going to be vulgar, but pardon me, but fuck you. I'm not ready to go. You can't have me. My first vivid memory of the next day was a very excited young nurse um, retelling the story of how I was gone for 6 seconds. Apparently I had flatlined for 6 seconds before they adjusted the dopamine, I think it was, and brought me back. But she was pretty excited to share that with me. I thought it was cute. I was glad to be there to hear it. But apparently, because the damage was so bad, and because of this, they couldn't control this VTAC and VFib. She said, we recommend you have a defibrillator implanted in your chest. And again, it was just, everything was so surreal. I said, how is this happening to me? This can't be. If there were times where I felt like this isn't happening. It's not, it's like somebody turn the movie off because it is so strange. And I said to the doctor after she delivered the news, I said, can I ask you a personal question? And she said, sure. I said, are you married? And both she and Lynn kind of looked at me and looked at each other. Where is he going with this? And I said, and she said, yes, she was. And I said, well, if this were your husband sitting here, what would you tell him to do? And she said, without hesitating, I'd tell him to get it done. And I said, okay, then that's what we're going to do. So they prepped me for surgery, and I had this little machine implanted under the skin. Now, if that fibrillation got too out of control, or if my heart rate got too low, this machine recognizes it, sends a false signal, doesn't get it back in, then it basically shocks. And the whole idea is to shock the heart back to a rhythm. So now I've got a safety net. Things seem to be stabilized. I hadn't had as many of the events. We went home to our condo in Manila. And but about 4:30 in the morning, or close to dawn, I know, as I recall being told, Lynn was awakened by what she described as this ghastly gasping noise, like guttural noise. And she turned over to see that I was unresponsive. And so she took my pulse, no pulse, I wasn't breathing. So she's kind of, I'm sure it was a matter of just fractions of a second maybe, but she's thinking, why isn't this defibrillator doing what it's supposed to do? And she waited a couple seconds, I guess, and then started giving me CPR, which is something your spouse shouldn't have to do. But it kept the blood pumping until eventually she said she felt something. So the defibrillator must have shocked, and my heart started beating again. So back to ICU for another couple of weeks. And it had only been a month since the event now at this time. And I just couldn't believe how different I looked. And I was super, super weak. I couldn't stand up. We had to put a little plastic chair in the shower because I couldn't stand up for that length of time to take a shower. And it was pretty weird. So a couple months went by, and I got a little bit of strength back, and they felt I was stable enough that I was given permission to fly back to Canada, which we were pretty eager to do. For one thing, it's private healthcare in the Philippines, and I was very fortunate that the company I was working for covered the costs, which was a lot. And it was within a couple of weeks, I was referred to the Peter Monk Cardiac Center at the Toronto General, and Dr. Heather Ross, who is a literal and figurative rock star. And it was only a couple weeks after seeing her, probably my second visit, and based on the tests and things that they'd done, she said, we're going to do everything we can to get the heart function back, but it's probably inevitable that you're going to need a transplant someday. I just couldn't grasp that this was happening to me. It just didn't make any sense. But at the time, though, she said, we really have no way of knowing, but based on, my level of health prior to, they expected it'd probably be 8 or 10 years before I would need the transplant. And I was having regular visits at the clinic with Dr. Ross and other doctors, but she was my main contact. And she entered the room every single time when it was just Lynn and I there, and sometimes an intern or whatever who would do the debrief first. But she'd always enter the room and say, "How's it going, team?" That was her thing. And this one day, it was in 2015. She walked in the room, did her the usual, "How's it going, team?" And I looked at her and I said, "I'm okay." And she just stopped in her tracks. She pulled up her chair, rolled up to mine, and took my hands in hers. And she said, "It's time, isn't it?" And through all the stuff and the procedures and everything, that was probably the toughest, certainly emotional moment that I ever had with from day one of the event to finally getting a transplant, is making the decision that, I don't want to live like this anymore. And so that was the day. And I remember I had a pretty good cry for a couple of minutes. And then kind of giving my head a shake and sitting up in the chair. And I said, "Okay, what now? What do we do? What's the plan? What do I do today, this afternoon, tomorrow, the next day?" Because, and this is going to sound horribly arrogant, and I've said the story a lot of times, but if anybody else can be successful at having a heart transplant and be well after, I'm going to be better. So just tell me what to do. Do I get on the treadmill tomorrow? What do I do? How long, how far, how fast? I'll do whatever you tell me. And so we started the plan. And this was that 8 to 10 years had not suddenly become about 2.5. So a little sooner than I expected, but that was the next part of the story, was preparing for transplant. In fact, Dr. Ross originally told me it would be 12 to 18 months. And I went, "What? I have to wait another 12 to 18 months? And my transplant coordinator talked to me afterwards and said, "It's not going to take that long, John. 6 to 8 months, probably, but not 12 to 18. And it's still a while. It was almost 2 months before I was actually listed. You have you go through a ton of evaluations and tests, and a lot of physical, of course, and blood work done a gazillion times, and all kinds of ECGs and EKGs and I don't know what else, all kinds of stuff, but also psychological and emotional and spiritual questions are asked. Just they want to make sure your mind and body are ready. November 25th, I remember getting I think it was a phone call or a message on their easy call phone system, and it said, you're officially on the list. That was November 25th, 2015. And because I was that data guy, I spent every day after that on the Trillium website trying to figure out when was my chance that I counted. And I would watch the number go up every day and thinking, okay, so they probably added, there's new hearts available. Or new people have been added, but I've got to be moving up. There's one gone. So I'm trying to calculate day after day. So still, that would have put it into the following summer of 2016, and that's when I had my mind set as to when I was probably going to get my transplant. January 23rd, 2016. My phone rings. Lynn and I it was like 10 p.m. I think. Lynn and I were watching TV, and my phone rings, and there's this lovely, friendly, sweet voice. Hi, John. My name's Candy. I'm calling from Toronto General Hospital. We have a heart that's a match. The thing is, this heart is actually a match for 2 people, and there's 1 person ahead of you on the list that it's a match for. So it's a high likelihood that this other person is going to be the recipient. But just in case something happens, or they decide they change their mind or whatever, we'd like you to be here, in case, because they certainly wouldn't want the donor heart to go to waste. We drove up to the emergency where they told us to go. Lynn went and parked the car while I walked in, and they directed me up to ICU, and went to the nurse's station. Lynn met me by then, and they directed us to the waiting room where we just sat there for a while watching some TV. And one of the doctors came in and said, just gave us an update what was going on. Sorry, you have to wait, and it probably looks like it's going to go ahead, but if you just sit tight for a bit. So we might have been there for an hour and a half, 2 hours, when they finally came back and said, yeah, it's we're going ahead with the surgery. I said, so this other guy's getting it? Yeah. I said, great. Well, that's awesome. There's no bad news about that. I didn't have to apologize. Our turn will come. So we drove home. It turned out to be the best thing that could have happened, in my opinion, because it was a perfect dry run dress rehearsal with no pressure. We knew when the time came next time exactly how to get there, where to go, where to walk. And so it took all the pressure off when you're, because we got to go do this walkthrough at a walkthrough pace, right? You didn't have to be rushing there urgently. Little did we know how soon that dress rehearsal would be used, because the next night at 2:30 in the morning, so actually now it's January 25th, first thing in the morning, my phone rings on the bedside table. Hi, John, it's Candy again, and we have another heart, but this one's for you. And so that was it. We went through the same routine again. I drove to the hospital again. Lynn went and parked the car. I walked up to ICU. But this time we were there probably by, 3:30, something like that, 4 o'clock in the morning, and head to the operating room. And as they took me away, and Lynn and I are having a moment, I looked up at her, and she curses me to this day. I said, well, honey, I hope we made the right decision, as they're wheeling me away down toward the operating room. So as I've come to learn, they opened me up at 8 a.m., I think. The heart arrived in the hospital at 8:30. And by 2 in the afternoon, I was back in my hospital room in recovery mode with about 18 or something lines of stuff coming out of me. I don't remember that day.
Join us for the second part of the Gifts of Life video podcast, when we'll hear Rick Prashaw tell the story of his son, Adam, an organ donor. Rick and his family discover a silver lining to their grief and some surprises along the way.